Today is Friday, April the 8th, 2016. This is Dogma Debate. I am your host, Seth Andrews. Today's Dogma Debate is probably unlike any other Dogma Debate you've heard before, as we kind of turn the tables. I'm not David Smalley. I'm Seth Andrews. I'm sitting here at the feet of David Smalley. When I grow up, I want to be David Smalley. But I had been, I actually dragged, I don't think I've ever done a video shoot in a room. Like, studios are designed to be intimate places, you know, like intimate for sound. Right. And so I brought like a 3+ camera rig plus lights, and we have all of this stuff in here. And so I don't know if we can have any more electronics in this place if we wanted to.
No. Definitely, we're already over fire hazard, I think.
But I'm here already an issue. Because this is like a biography channel profile, for the first few minutes anyway. I just wanted a chance to talk to David Smalley on camera. And he's like, hey, you're in town, you're in Dallas, come do the show. And I'm like, well, I'm going to be in town. I need a profile. You got a studio. Let's do the thing. Right. And so here we are. So, God, that sounded like a freaking cartoon character there.
That did.
Let's do the thing. Hey. So anyway, thanks for allowing me to come and be a part of the Dogma Debate experience here. It's amazing in this studio.
Thanks, man. Thanks, man.
Obviously a labor of love. This place is fantastic. So.
Yeah, when you walked in, those first words, labor of love. And I got to tell you, we started out... you know those old, I guess it's not old, they still have them, but they're just like, imagine a dining set you would see in a breakfast nook, right?
Yeah.
Light brown tabletop with white legs, white chairs with a brown seat, and then a white bench that goes with it with a brown seat on it. That bench was the first ever Dogma Debate table.
Oh, really?
Okay, yeah. And then we used Xbox headsets that were plugged in.
That's awesome.
And that's where it all started. One laptop, 2 Xbox headsets, and some free software, and that's where it all started.
I think producers start early. Not to make an interview of you about me, but real fast, a quick anecdote. My father used to have this, I kid you not, it was a cassette, children, is this plastic thing with tape and spools on it, okay? Well, when I was growing up, my father I've never seen one before or since. It was a cassette player about as large as the old school overhead projectors were, the ones they used to drag into your elementary school. I mean, it was, imagine dubbing. A couple of shoe boxes is probably the appropriate size. And the cassette must have been 10 inches wide by, 7 inches tall. And these big cassettes, and it had this old school, looked like a CB radio microphone. And we dug this thing out of the attic. Dad, where'd you get this thing,
Oh, so cool.
And so growing up, I could see the early producer because we'd have some soundtrack from some film on album, and we'd play it in the background, and then we'd grab the mic and we'd all be doing our voices, I am your father kind of thing, And we were always creating, we were always storytelling. I think storytellers start early. And you can see the people who enjoy communicating. I have a feeling Smalley was probably much the same way.
Man, I got to tell you, when my mom used to go out a lot, she would go out on Saturday nights. It was never done in a way that we would deem socially irresponsible, but she would go out and she would party. She would go out to bars. And I deemed myself, as she was getting ready, her DJ. And so what I would do with cassettes, by the way, I would sit in, and she had a huge like floor stereo and dual cassette, by the way, and I could play one song, get it queued up. First of all, I would bring my little dual cassette player in there to rewind and find right at the cue, get it, mark it with tape on what song I was going to play next.
Oh yeah,
I was like 9. And I would have it on tape, which one I was going to play, which side I was going to play. I would stack them all up, and I would intentionally play things like, what's that guy's song? Something about drinking and driving. John Anderson. A country song. Don't be drinking when you're driving.
I know I'm from Oklahoma, but I don't know this song.
When you get on the whiskey. You've never heard this song before?
Look, I don't do country music.
I've got to play this song for you at some point. It's funny, but even at 9, I was like trying to send my mom subliminal messages through radio to not drink and drive, because she was going out. And I would put this whole playlist together, and I'd be like, all right, Mom, coming up next. And I'd be like shouting because I know she's in the bathroom curling her hair. And it was a lot of fun. And then she would leave, and and I would play football by myself around the house.
You say
break stuff.
You suffer from an excess of personality, and this is the kind of job that you land in. You know?
I used to walk around with a little handheld recorder and record people's conversations and ask them questions, and never knew what to do with it afterwards.
People have asked, what drives the broadcaster? Is it ego? Is it wild insecurity? Or is it insanity? And my answer is always yes.
Yes. I was thinking the same thing.
Yes. There's a part of me that's, I'm comfortable in my own. No one should be behind a broadcast microphone who doesn't think they can pull it off.
Right.
You got no business being in this business. If you think, can I do this? Right. You have to have enough competence. At the same time, if I was to be honest, and I'm guessing most of the people I've met in the business of broadcasting, there's a part of us that is a little bit needy. Mm-hmm. Please say you like the show. Please say it. Please say please validate me. There's a part of that, if we were to be honest with ourselves. The performers have this. I was watching a biography on the late Robin Williams, one of the most talented people in the history of talented people, right? A man who owned the stage wherever and whenever he was. And yet in his private life, in some ways, he didn't know, he was always craving the next moment behind the microphone because there's something about him that needed that, and there's probably an element of that to all performers.
Sure. And I remember being, I was in a band for a while as well.
Vocals or what?
Started as a drummer in one band, moved over to lead vocals, and we toured and had a blast with it. I mean, I was front man. I was on stage, signed a record deal.
Wow.
With a label in Dallas. And
dude, you crooned for a freaking. I mean, you were front man for a band?
I was for 2 years.
I played keys. Drummers always got the girls.
Yeah.
The keyboard player, he's artistic. Guitar players and drummers were the ones who always had the groupies. The keyboard players.
And I got to be the drummer first, and I saw that side of it. The thing I hated about being the drummer is I always had 10 times more crap to carry than anybody else. And then as the singer, I would just walk in with my little wireless Shure microphone, connected up.
It was a Mr. Microphone with the boombox next to it, where you would.
No. We were full. We were full on, man. I mean, we were playing at like 1,200 person venues and selling them out, and had the full stage. We had the light show going on behind the stage.
I just had flashed to the Mr. Microphone back in the day. For those who don't know what it is, it's a toy. And you bring it and you turn your radio to a certain frequency. And if you were within about 1.5 feet of it, you could hear your voice sort of on the radio, And this was a thing back in the 80s. So
we all had play school instruments.
So when did you found, for lack of a better word, the Dogma Debate show? We talking how many years?
It started as a blog. It was Dogma Debate. It was a place, because what I was finding is people would go to sites, and the sites I was going to in 2005, 2006 to try to find other like-minded people. Those sites were people were just rude to each other. They were nasty. You believe in, Santa Claus for adults. This is ridiculous. Grow up, idiot. And you're going to hell. When they baptized you, they should have held you under, type thing. And it was from both sides. And I thought, I want a place where people can have this dialogue. And instead of negative comments being deleted, I want negative comments to be called out, to say this isn't going to be productive. So I started this blog where I would blog on a topic, and then Christians and atheists would come argue on it. And if they got nasty, I would comment and say, how do you think that's going to forward this conversation? And I called that website Dogma Debate. And that launched in 2008.
I've been that guy, though. I mean, I think you and I share an empathy for believers that some don't have. I think many, many do. But
sure.
I think you and I have made a real pact to see the religious person in 3 dimensions, where it's easy to throw stones across the pond and say, it's us versus them. They're idiots. We're enlightened, right. Which may not necessarily be the case. But how do you manage that? If someone comes in and they're ridiculing the ridiculous, if they're calling religion out, do you call that negativity and put the kibosh on that? Or how do you draw the line?
Normally where I draw the line is when the argument goes off the topic from the argument and becomes an attack on the person.
The ad hominems
and
kick in.
I'll give you an example. Our good friend Aaron Ra, he used to be a co-host on the show. And there was a time where I had a Christian apologist in studio and Aaron. And Aaron and I have completely different styles, right?
Yeah, he's a pit bull.
He is. And he's so entertaining to listen to, so brilliant. I love the guy to death. But I had to start wondering, is this a good mix? Because it's almost like oil and water. We're both great for certain things, but should we really be mixing on the same show? And the day I realized that was we had a guy, an apologist in studio, and Aaron like challenged him on a topic that William Lane Craig had a point on. And the guy very quickly says, "Oh, I disagree with William Lane Craig on that," and tried to distance himself from it. And Aaron just kept hammering the guy over the same thing. And I found myself having to defend the apologist by going, "Calm down, Aaron. You know, that's not his position." For me, when it becomes about that, that's when I check out. I don't think necessarily Aaron should, or there's no ought on how to deal with this. But for me and my show, I wanted to take it a different direction. And so for me, when the argument gets lost and it becomes about the person, that's when I'll say I don't want to be a part of that.
I think his tactic is effective for him, usually effective for. I think I'm the same way. I think we each kind of have the angle that we take. I find myself, I get frustrated. If I had a dime for every day, I had another one today. Why are you so angry? That was going to be my first question to you, David, right? Tell me about Dogma Debate. Why are you so angry at God, right?
Yeah.
And I get frustrated, and I think I am not an angry guy, but I have my moments. And one of the reasons that I have those moments is because we just finished a school recently, not long ago, on homeschool cults, the fundamentalist homeschools. You see damage done, you become indignant, and then you become frustrated because it doesn't seem like, in many ways, nobody else sees it. Or it's the people in your own circle, the religious people in your circle, you're like, "Hello, danger, Will Robinson, we got a problem." Does no one else see this wildfire out of control, the bad ideas, the pseudoscience, the indoctrination, the cultural reinforcement, the belief perseverance? Does no one else see it? And they all just look at you and go, "Why are you so angry? I'll pray for you," that kind of thing. Yeah. And then I get indignant and upset,
I did a whole video on YouTube, and part of it was a blog that I wrote. It was about, it was called A Life Against. And it's this whole concept that one day I had this sort of crisis. This was probably 2 years ago. So again, I started the blog in 2008, launched the podcast in 2010 in a premature form, relaunched in 2012 in its current format. And that's where our numbers are from, the 4.5 million downloads or whatever, started January 2012. And I remember this crisis coming over me because I realized I was always the one going, you can't prove that. You can't prove that.
I bet the Sunday school teachers loved you.
And so I remember thinking, do I just have an entire life as a broadcaster, as an activist, as a podcaster? Is my entire life now about negativity? Am I the one going, "You can't prove that. You can't prove that"? Or am I for something? Am I just having this life standing against religion? I'm anti this, anti that, anti-Republican. What am I for? And I started writing thinking, maybe I should stop. Maybe, there are people that dedicate their lives to wonderful charities. There are people who dedicate their lives to getting clean water in remote parts of Africa that don't have them. There are people who dedicate their lives to stop child trafficking. What the hell am I doing arguing with theists about how old the earth is? Am I just having a life against whatever it is? And then I started thinking about all the kids that are mistreated because of religion, that are literally beaten with Bibles, the ones that are forced to believe that there are demons watching them day in and day out, the entire LGBT community who is mistreated because of religious indoctrination, the politicians who are taken advantage of over religious indoctrination. I look over playgrounds and go, wow, how many of these kids are forced to go to church and told that they are born evil, they are born broken, they are born sadistic and sick, and they have this impossible race to perfection in order to go to heaven before they die, or they will burn in eternity. I've got to stop this induced psychosis in these children. This is sad. And then I start realizing, you know what? I have a life for equality. I have a life for truth. I have a life for skepticism and reality and peace and acceptance. And so that's where I go, now I have another guilt. I'm sorry I doubted myself. I'm sorry I considered stopping. And that's what the entire blog is about. It's on YouTube. It's called A Life Against.
It reminds me of that quote by Robert Greene Ingersoll. He said, "The more false we destroy, the more room we make for the true." So while I'm totally on your page, we need to be proactive about positive change. Right now we did a thing a few years ago where we had some wells dug. Hopefully there's no dung in them.
I hope not. Yeah,
in Ethiopia, and they have atheist on the little plaque in front of the well. And I always thought, I'll bet these people who are desperate for clean water, they don't care one iota whether or not the word atheist is on that thing. There might be some shaman or something somewhere who might flip out. But, I want to be about that. But at the same time, I think you're right. Tearing down the false is a worthy endeavor, because we have to tear down bad ideas to be able to make more room for the better ideas.
But I think those words need to come together, though.
Yeah.
If you're always just talking about what you're against, the people in the opposition are going to get the wrong idea. They're going to think that you just live a life against. So it's important that when you're arguing atheism, try not to argue from the perspective of dragging that person kicking and screaming into your worldview. Try to do it from a perspective, and this is what I tell my listeners, try to do it from the perspective of explaining atheism, not persuading for atheism, right? You're explaining it, and then couple with that humanism. Why are you against it? There's a positive reason. There's love. There's humanity. There's
progress. We know, though, there's an ilk of people who enjoy just skewering religious people. I mean, they're not about changing minds. Right. The reason they engage is not because that person A wants person B to come to a moment of epiphany. They want to engage person B because the more ridiculous and stupid and idiotic and insane person B looks, well, the smarter person A looks. It's sort of it's a way for them to pat themselves on the back. Mm-hmm. Hey, look how smart, look how superior, look how enlightened I am. There's an ilk of that. We've all been, well, many of us have been, I've been guilty in a few conversations where I'm like, that's the stupidest. When I first got out of religion, I was just pissed off all the time. And I had some of that. You believe in Noah's Ark.
It's therapeutic. In ways, it can be therapeutic to lash out at something that you feel like was detrimental to your life.
I was pretty keyed up. I've been lied to. I can't believe, who would believe all this nonsense? And I may have been arguing in a way with myself. Seth, why did it take you the greater part of 3 decades to discover that human beings couldn't live to be 900 years old? It's just terrifying. I'm terrified at how long.
But I got to tell you, and people know, the listeners of this show anyway, know me as a guy that's going to extend the olive branch. A guy that's going to sit down with a pastor.
No, I'm kidding. Go ahead.
A guy that's going to sit down with a pastor and let him say things that are just horribly offensive to most people. People will sit in that chair right there where you are, and they'll say things like, well, homosexuality is just like pedophilia. And for the next 30 seconds, my ears are just ringing. Mm-hmm. Their mouth is moving, and I'm just thinking, are you out of your mind?
Now, do you let them go, though, to give them enough rope to hang themselves?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I know these pastors are probably listening to me now. And
No.
This is kind of a behind-the-scenes show, and I'm giving away my secrets here. But yeah, that's part of it.
You may just want to give audience. You may want to give a fair. You may want to give fair audience to whoever you're speaking to. That's possible.
It's both.
But I was just curious. I'm like, many times if someone's throwing out just what I consider to be a preposterous idea, say if your opponent's making a mistake, don't interrupt them. And I may be guilty of that to a degree. If something is coming out of their mouth, there is a time to step in. But for a while, you may sit back and go, all right, fine. We'll give this all the spotlight you would like it to have. Because the more light it receives, the more heat it's going to get, kind of thing.
Let me rephrase it. It's not necessarily to hang themselves. It's really because they very likely have never heard themselves verbalize their thoughts. And so I ask these questions in a way that they will have to say these things for the first time. And I forget who said it. I quote them in one of my talks. I could pull up the quote. But I think he says something along the lines of, and I'm paraphrasing, how do I know what I think until I hear myself say it? Right, it's one of these things that I don't really know. I have these thoughts, these ideas, and so what I just like to do, and a lot of believers especially, will live their life day to day, logic, reason, science, day in and day out, trusting technology, all these things, and then they will believe something that is completely in contradiction to how they live their life. But they only do that part on Sunday mornings, and everything else is on Tuesday afternoon at 3 p.m.
So they love science until it's time to distrust all scientists.
Right,
That kind of thing.
exactly. And so what I like to do is just take out all the crap in between and go, you said this, and then you said this. Well, I can never do that if I don't let them speak.
Yeah.
So I want them to hear what they say and say, do you see? And when something's really offensive, rather than me going, I can't believe you just said that, get the hell out of my studio.
Yeah.
What I say is, do you see how some people could be really offended by that?
I totally buy that. I mean, I think it's a better approach. I mean, there's a time to become indignant, but everybody's stomping around shouting, nothing ever changes. You know, I had some of the same effect with the Abraham story. Devout believers who see Abraham as a huge icon of faith, someone they would like to emulate, until I say, which of your children would you execute on the picnic table in the backyard with a knife if God told you to do so? And they say, you know what? I'll never lay a hand of harm to my child. I would rather receive punishment from God. And I always stop them right there. And I say, you realize you just made a moral judgment outside of the Bible, and you demonstrated a greater morality than your supposedly moral foundation. You are actually more moral than the God you're defending right now, because you wouldn't harm a child.
Absolutely.
And I had one person, he said it literally, he thought about it, and he came back months later and he said it actually changed everything that I'd ever thought about, you know, the character of Abraham. And I think those types of conversations are hugely beneficial.
Yeah, I've used that exact line several times. I believe you are more moral than the God you worship.
You are more moral than a God who would say, execute your child to prove to me what I already know, you know, to prove your faith to me, kind of thing. So, yeah, I mean, I think, and I'm a big fan of questions, especially, you know, I don't think it works in every case, and I don't know where your breaks are in the show, so I'm a very verbose guy. So
I'll play a little thing of music to be,
all right,
that'll be your secret.
You'll start to vibrate and say, Seth, shut your blathering pie hole.
Sounds something like this. What?
I don't hear anything.
Like this.
All right.
Go ahead. I'm listening.
I honestly think I can't even remember what I was saying before I stopped.
Now, that's professionalism.
I totally, it's like, where are my keys? You ever do that?
All the time.
Now, I'm going to be 48 in a matter of days.
48? Really?
Yeah.
I thought we were a lot closer in age than that. I really did. I thought we were. I had no idea you were
all I know is everything's starting to slide.
I didn't realize you were so seasoned.
In every sense. I'm just saying. For my birthday, my family bought me a Zipline package. So, you know, where you go and they strap you up.
Please tell me this is going to be on video.
You slide, I guess, 3 miles down this cord somewhere. And my first thought was, they have zip lines in Oklahoma, like the flattest country in the.
Actually, there's some route that I've taken out of Texas, heading your direction toward Oklahoma, and it's the largest zip line something in the country.
What?
It's somewhere between us. I don't know where, but it's huge.
I've just pictured this totally.
Are you going to strap a GoPro to yourself so we can enjoy this later?
I might. I just picture this flat sort of cord, and you have to ooch yourself forward about 6 inches at a time. I'm going to be up there for my birthday. I'm going to look like a big tea bag, just sliding down this cable. I am going to try to document it, and I might put some stuff on YouTube.
From what I understand, you're kind of sitting down. Right, so you're not having to support your weight. That was my first thought. I can't hold on that long.
Very important that I don't have to support my weight.
You're going to be holding on, and then there's some sort of they do it on trees, I think.
Yeah.
So there's this huge tree or huge
crest
platform.
the treetops, and you go from platform to platform, and then at the bottom, you know, you high five and you say, "Hey, I did that," and move on. So.
I would love to see a GoPro facing you. That's gotta happen.
I'll pray about it
on the Thinking Atheist YouTube page.
I'll pray and seek the Lord and get back to you. All right,
burn some candles and do a seance.
All right.
Coming up next, we're going to talk about something. How's that for professional radio?
Sure, let's do it.
I intentionally did not plan a run sheet for this show so that we could just openly talk about.
Like we're having trouble coming up with stuff to talk about.
We both struggle with that.
Yeah,
both of us we're very shy and. All right, so coming up next, more with Seth Andrews right here on Dogma Debate.
Oh, yeah! Some people say my love cannot be true. Please believe me, my love
Welcome back to Dogma Debate. We will be going live this entire show for about 60 minutes or so, and then we're running into the extended show. So if you're not already signed up, now would be the perfect time to do that at login.dogmadebate.com. Now where all members actually have access to live streaming video, not just Plus members, all members access to live streaming video. But a few people have signed up as premium members, and as we do every show, I'm going to give them some thanks right now. I want to start with Albin Johnson, David Aubin, Paul Kersey, Matthew Keller, Marcos Lopez, Andy Heckler, and the famous, wonderfully talented Justin Krebs, who also helps us out with audiobook production. We thank you so much for all your love and support.
You know, it's interesting, and I do this all the time myself, but your notes for part of that, you do right off your smartphone, right? Mm-hmm. I'm a videographer. I was a professional videographer for about a decade before I became a full-time heathen last summer.
Mm-hmm. Congratulations on that, by the way.
Yeah, thank you.
It's a big deal.
It's been frightening and amazing and wonderful and terrifying and amazing.
I understand.
But I was asked to go shoot video of a funeral. This guy's father had died of a heart attack, and they had family well outside of the state who couldn't get in for the funeral, right?
Okay.
And so they're like, we want them to be able to hear the words that were said. We want them to know what happened. And I thought, well, that's kind of cool. You know, at first I thought, oh, you're going to video a funeral. That's dark, you know.
Yeah.
But I get it. We have people who can't be there to pay their last respects. We want to capture this moment for them. And one of the people who went up and gave his, for lack of a better word, eulogy or his memorial, he read the whole thing right off his smartphone. He just pulled his, iPhone or whatever, and he just read the whole thing. And I thought, welcome to the 21st century, man.
Yeah, I tend to prefer paper. Whenever we do segments where we do what we call a Sunday question on our Dogma Debate Radio Facebook page, where one of our producers will ask a question and people comment like crazy, I always have him bring them in paper. Like I love the rattle.
You're tactile.
In the background.
You're a tactile person.
I love it, but some things change so often that it needs to be digital. So like the member thing, I have this here. I'll show you. We are behind the scenes now. I have, and this is just, that's all it is. It's a phone number that is set up specifically to send me text messages 15 minutes before the live show begins with a list of members.
Oh, wow.
So it just set up to do it automatically, because if someone brings me paper, 2 hours before the show or the day before the show, I'm going to lose it. So the fact that this is all set up digitally, I have to do that part digitally. Oh, yeah, I've seen people do that, like address city council or something off their smartphone.
Used to be the guy who, if you walked, and I'm not like this anymore, but back in the day, if you walked into my office, my video production office, surrounding the monitor were just Post-it notes. Just posted. And, I couldn't tell you what half of them were because they were so old. It's just, oh, yeah, I need to make sure I do this. Got to call so-and-so, pop it up there. And I'd still forget. And so now if it wasn't for Google Calendar and, all these other phone apps, Keynote or whatever, that the digital reminder has kept me from just losing my mind. I don't know how I did birthdays before Facebook. So-and-so has a birthday this week.
You were a jerk. That's what happened. You pissed a lot of people off, I think.
Hi, Mom. Happy birthday. Facebook told me about it, that kind of thing. And it's just because I've just never been very good at I've got to have it written in some way or else it's just gone,
I've thought about that before with this show. I mean, if something goes wrong, technically, we could lose. I mean, look, when I interviewed Penn Jillette, we did a 20-minute conversation and everything blacked out. Video went out, 20 minutes in, video went out, audio locked up, everything locked up completely, everything. And by the time I got him back, everything was lost.
Oh, no.
He's such a sweet guy. He stayed there on Skype or Google Hangouts, I think it was, waiting for the interview to come back. When I brought everything back, and we had done a couple of things where he said some really offensive stuff about me, and I thought it was hilarious.
That sounds like Penn Jillette.
He had some hilarious quotes that he slammed me on, and I wanted to capture those things, and they were all gone. And so I had to just be like, wow, man, we just lost that entire 20 minutes. And I'm thinking, my entire livelihood, you mentioned going full-time heathen. I'm on year 3 of being full-time doing this. I've started my 3rd year, and I'm thinking, my entire livelihood now is dependent upon technology working. And if it doesn't, I'm so screwed. It's part of the terrifying nature of being full-time into this.
Well, back in the day when FM radio stations locked up conversations like these, you had to, either work for millionaires or be a millionaire. You had to be a major corporation to be a player at all. And you were consulted to death, and you couldn't say this and you can't say that. And when I was doing FM radio, I was on Kiss FM for a while, and it's just liner cards for a while. It's the kind of thing that most people hear on most pop radio, that you could instantly replace whoever's speaking with some automaton. Nobody plays more music for the workday. 50 minutes of music every hour. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to be listening tomorrow morning to Mark and Mike and Mandy in the morning show and the secret song of the day at 7:20. I mean, that kind of stuff is all we did. And if I quit,
so great.
5 minutes later, they would have replaced me with someone who could read the exact same thing the exact same way, Mm-hmm. And the upside is, even though the internet is quirky and Google Hangouts and Skype, we've all had our moments, is that these major players no longer have the conversation locked up. Yeah. Anybody, anywhere who has something to say, for better or for worse, can say it. The idea that, I don't have to censor myself. If one show is going to be 45 minutes because we've got 45 minutes worth of stuff to say, and another one is 2 hours and 45 minutes because we have that much stuff to say, we have so much freedom.
Right.
I think the only other challenge, the one challenge, one of the many, is that you're sort of a needle in a stack of needles. There are a lot of people doing this out there. Yeah. But, Dogma Debate's always been a quality show. I think that speaks to your success.
Were you the first?
My first what?
Were you the first guy that did? I mean, outside of like Madeline Murray O'Hare, who did atheist radio and like Ask an Atheist call-in lines.
Oh no!
I mean, I don't remember anyone ever doing an atheist-based, completely atheist podcast.
No, I'm sure there were people doing. I didn't do a lot of homework on who was already out there when I started. I was just blown away that you could do radio on the internet. I was just. And I was, how it is, it's so busy, you're so busy prepping content, and it's a zero-sum game. You know what it's like. As soon as a show goes up, you are immediately starting at square one for the next show. And you have an audience base that you want to make sure you're respecting their time and the investment they've made into you and your show. Right. And so you go back into preparation, plus you got a video, plus you're flying here because you're going to do this or moderate a debate or you're going to speak or what have you. And after a while, it's just, you find yourself a little bit envious of those who have the time to go and listen to all these other shows.
Yeah, I've often said I spend so much time being an activist, I don't have time to be an atheist.
That's very much true.
I want to engage this stuff. I would love to listen to you and cognitive dissonance, and I want to get these different viewpoints and have a blast. There's no time for it.
I try to catch enough of it that I'm aware of what they're doing and I can get behind them or decide if I don't want to get behind them,
Right.
But there's just not enough bandwidth, man. There's no way to keep up. Here's a great example, and I've been privileged I'm reading in the studio, reading and recording an audiobook. It's like a 67 chapter audiobook, kind of a sci-fi thing with secular themes, and it's been amazing. But it's one of a mountain of different pieces of text that people send and say, would you read this? Well, I would love to be able to read and watch every 2-hour debate video that you send and look through. People send these wonderful emails, but they're monumentally long with no spaces. Yeah. Sometimes no punctuation.
Just a block.
It's just expression. They're just getting it out. You can tell they've been holding their breath for so long. And so you do what you can. You try to assimilate as much as you can. You try to respond to as much as you can. But you really you have to try to come to terms with your own limits as a single human being and the ability to be able to do or not do. And the word no is tough for me. You don't ever want to say no. You want to say yes to everything or almost everything. Balance is hard for activists. Do you struggle with burnout? Do you ever hit a wall and just say, I'm physically and emotionally fried? Like, I'm going to Cancun or something like that.
I think I do I do in very short spurts. Like when I sit in here and do a 3-hour conversation with a pastor and he leaves and I start winding down for the night, if Brandy comes to me and goes, hey, let's watch this documentary on cults, I go, no, I'm watching SpongeBob and I'm going to sleep. But the next day I can get right back on it.
They call it bubble gum for the brain, right?
Yeah.
It's sort of a mental It's a mental Candy Crush. Well, I don't know if Candy Crush is a good example.
That's stressful. I can't do that.
I struggle when I have. I mean, I don't know if anybody cares, but there were times in my own relationship where Natalie would be like, I would be up in the studio till editing till 1:32, and I would come back and I'd be exhausted, and she'd be sitting there bleary eyed. She's in bed, and she'd wake up when I come in, and she looked at me at one point. This was years ago, and it caused me to have to do a reevaluation of my own life. She said, I love the fact that you are who you are and you're being true to yourself. She said, I fear that your family is getting the leftovers. And of course, whoa, it just hit me like a train. And I came to realize I was so busy trying to be out there as part of the bigger conversation that I'd neglected the smaller but as or even more conversations in my own home. And it brought me to a point where I had to sort of refocus and say, not everything is about trying to get 100,000 downloads on the next video. How about you shut everything off, unplug for a few hours, and go spend some quality time with the people who make your life so good. And it's still a struggle.
When it comes to that, you're exactly right. That balance was hard for me. At one point, I was working a full-time job. I lived an hour away. So, that was a 2-hour commute. Working a full-time job. I was a full-time college student, taking enough hours to be considered full-time. I was working on my first book, Baptized Atheist, and I was the editor of the American Atheist magazine. So every time my wife or kids saw me, it was a book in front of my face, a computer in front of my face, or I had the phone in my ear saying, "Not now, honey." And that was a strain. It was a strain on all of us. And I was the only one that understood what was happening. I was the only one that was passionate about what was happening. And I want to take a moment to address a couple of things that you said, because I think I've found, and I don't think I've created or developed, I think I've lucked into or been privileged enough to have this situation happen to me. My entire family is now a part of the business, right? My son is one of the producers for the show. Brandy is not only the chief operating officer of Secular Media Group, the actual parent company that we own. She runs video. She's a co-host on the show. And then people just are absolutely in love with Talissa. She does science segments. She goes on the road. She helps us sell T-shirts. And everyone understands why. They understand what's going on, the passion behind it, the people we're fighting for, the equality. My 11-year-old daughter will get into arguments with her friends about gay rights. And I see this type of standing up, and I go, okay, I'm no longer the guy that's off doing the weird thing in his studio now. Now they understand what all this is about.
It's kind of a shared purpose then. Yeah.
Right. And so when we travel now to go out of state or go on these tours or I'm gone, they get excited because now it's family road trip. It's not just dad's got to go away to go to work, right? It's family road trip. It's we're going to go see other family members. We're going to Austin. Yay, I miss Matt. We're going to see Matt and Beth, right? And that's the mindset. Well, we're going up to the Midwest toward Nebraska. Is Sarah Moorhead going to be there? Are we going to get to see Sarah? We're going to Chicago. Is Phil going to be there? That's awesome. And it doesn't matter where we go in the country now. We have this atheist family or this secular family that we're connected with. And back on what you were talking about on the people send you things. I want you to read this. This is a manuscript I'm working on. What do you think? That's been one of my biggest struggles because producing as many audiobooks as we have, we Atheist Audiobooks produced 25 audiobooks. Now we're up to 27. But the business itself, I had personally done the voiceovers for 11 of those books. And that is so taxing. It is so time consuming.
People don't realize.
They don't.
They don't.
They hear it and go, oh, that's easy. You read a book.
No.
Try it. Read one chapter into a microphone.
Yeah, right. Read 80,000 words. Yeah. Inflecting, you're acting, you're cutting and you're doing different takes. You're experimenting a little bit to find flow and cadence and inflection.
And pronunciation.
Yeah.
I mean, you're reading fiction right now, which I'm sure there are some things in there words that don't exist. Things that
there's some like
it's made up.
Quantum science comments and stuff in there. And I find myself at some point, I went on Google for half an hour just to try to figure out how to say this stuff.
Oh, man, I'm telling you, I just did 2 voiceovers for Vic Stenger audiobooks. The guy was brilliant.
The guy's like vocabulary, and there is nothing under 5 syllables in his
insanity.
Anything he's written,
And then he would mention some one-off scientist who's still living, incidentally, this one guy from Russia who said this one thing. And it's literally one quote. It's 7 words. And I don't know how to say the guy's name. And pronunciation websites don't know how to say it. The book doesn't have any pronunciation. So you know what I'm doing? I'm on YouTube searching through and sifting through all of the speeches this guy has given, waiting for someone to introduce him so they say his name.
Really?
And it's 40 minutes to find out how to say this one guy's name.
I have watched videos in foreign languages that I do not understand, waiting
for
to
that
hear
one name.
a geographic location.
Yeah, I've done the same thing.
There's a region of a place and a place of a thing in a country, and I have no idea. I can't find it. It is so far. It's so remote. And so I will watch a video, some sort of tourism video in another language, waiting. And you know how fast they're speaking. It's just like... and when I finally hear it, it's like a moment of a victory, like you just found the gem.
Yes, I got it. Yeah,
you mined the diamond out of the cave, kind of thing. Do
you ever just flat out say a word that it's not even on the page?
I heard. Oh yeah, all the time.
You get back from your editor and go, "Are you doing the editing too, or do you have an editor that's doing it?"
Well, I whittle it down a little bit, but there are times when I'll think what, and sometimes it's if someone. Here's what I do. If someone says something to me or writes something and gives me a note while I'm reading, thinking they're helping, whatever that is, I will start reading out loud. So it'll be like, and Moses walked across we're out of milk. I'm going to the store. My brain automatically has to finish the sentence.
I was going to tell you one of my weaknesses is my inability to ignore things. We'll be in the middle of a show and there'll be a drink will fall over. And I'm thinking a professional broadcaster will push right through this. And I'm going, what the hell just happened?
Can't stand it.
I'm live on air and I'm calling out the bell ringing or a glass spilling or a dog barking. I don't know what it is, but I'm the same way, especially when someone in studio. You usually do your show by yourself, right? It's just you in a box. I'm kind of jealous sometimes.
No, I enjoy it, and I also envy you. I'm fortunate I get enough interaction back and forth, I think, from our listeners, but there are many times that I think it would be nice to have what you and I are doing right here, eye to eye, face to face. The Skype co-host thing co-hosting is all about timing, right? Yeah. And if you've got that lag, that delay, you lose it. Plus, chemistry between hosts is nothing you can fake. It's many of the best radio partnerships are happy accidents. Mm-hmm. A great example is Phil Stone and Brent Douglas at 97.5 KMOD Classic Rock in Tulsa, Oklahoma. They came up with the famous Roy D. Mercer character who would prank call her, "This is Roy D. Mercer."
Yeah.
And he became hugely famous. Well, Brent Douglas was a pharmacist. He wasn't even a broadcaster. He would call the morning show when Phil was on, and he was just so stinking funny that before you knew it, they brought him on, and those two went on to become a quarter-century icon of broadcasting in the Southwest. But you can't plan it, you can't force it, and everybody's like, "I'll be a co-host." Well, it's just not that simple. It speaks to personality, it speaks to timing, it speaks to flow, it speaks to all these other things.
Even if you're very good at what you do on your own.
Absolutely.
Just like I was saying with Aaron Raw, he is brilliant at what he does. His videos, I've learned so much from his videos. Anytime we're at a convention, we look at each other, talk at each other, learn from each other. I love that guy. It's not the right flow. It's just not the right fit for us to be together all the time. It's exactly the same way when you have someone that, like you said, it's a happy accident. They come over as a guest. Every one of my co-hosts started off as a guest. They come in studio, they're a guest, we have fun, and I go, that was really fun. Yeah, I'd like to have that person back. That's how
gelled, right? We gelled.
Absolutely. But my comment, though, was going to be about when you have multiple people in studio and something happens. This is maybe what you haven't experienced recently anyway. There's a guest in front of me. I'm in the middle of a point. There's a conversation going. I keep glancing up at my timer. I've got my notes here. I've got things I'm marking off my list. Have I mentioned Pitchstone? Have I mentioned Valley Storms? Have I done my reading for the member list? Do I have my phone next to me? I've been saying you can live tweet during the show at David C. Smalley. Do I have my phone ready to read off some tweets? I've got all this stuff going on, and I'm watching the timer. I'm watching the levels on the board, and all these things are happening, and I'm trying to keep a conversation going. And out of the corner of my eye, I see arms flailing like this, and I lock up. I go, what?
You have to just
shut
down.
Everything. Yeah. What do you want? And then it's usually Brandy or Donovan, and they're like, sorry, but video froze for like 10 seconds, and we're back on now.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Yeah.
Don't
do that.
I worked with a guy, a precious, talented man. His name was Jim, but he was one of those meticulous people. Everything was alphabetized and color-coded. His whole life. We were polar opposites because I was just a slob. We were like Felix and Oscar, right? The odd couple. And he couldn't stand anything to be out of place or out of line. Well, he read the news at the top and bottom of every hour during the morning show. So he's doing the newscast, 5-minute live newscast. And during the news, I got up from my morning show host chair and I went over and I took one of the portraits. We had all these artist portraits on the wall, and I cocked it so that it was not level. Right in front of if I'm lying, I'm dying. If I'm lying, I'm dying. He stopped the newscast. He put his newspapers on the table. He got up. He walked around
live on air,
dead air, live. Not a sound as he did it. And he walked all the way to the wall, and he had to correct the picture. And he came back and picked up and finished the newscast as if he could not stand it.
Okay.
He could not. Stand
Maybe that's a part of our. There may be something that helps us. Capture this radio thing.
I don't know.
That's just a weakness.
Oh, one of the
this thing right behind me, this Foundation Beyond Belief thing behind me on the wall. I don't know if your camera is catching it.
No, I don't think I have it on camera, but I see it. It's like
it's the plaque. You were a part of that when we did the 24-hour, the very first one we did
with the big marathon.
That's the plaque that they gave us. We have some members in our chat room who are live streaming video. Who, if that thing is off a little bit, that becomes the focus of the conversation. And so sometimes right before the show, I'll just nudge it a little bit to one side and drive them nuts.
One of the most famous tricks that radio broadcasters do to each other especially on talk radio shows, is if you have a smoker in the room who has a lighter in their pocket while the person holds up. And this is before they used to do a lot of it on digital. There's still quite a bit on paper, but there was paper only a few years ago. While someone's reading the newscast, you go over and you light the news copy on fire. While they're doing the live broadcast.
Now,
it is a common thing. It's just a common gag that they would do.
I wouldn't be so mad if they lit it from the top. You know why? I want to don't light it from the bottom.
Let me get through the content before it.
Light it from the top, and I'll race the fire down to my fingers. Don't light it from the bottom. I haven't read that part yet.
That's just how broadcasters, in many ways, I think, are just big boys with expensive toys. Big boys and girls with expensive toys, and they are unique in their creativity when it comes to pranking each other and doing that type of stuff. And even now, my studio, I don't know about your studio, I don't see a lot of tchotchkes, but I've just got crap all over. I've got Moses action figures, and I've got the alien with the egg, with the thing made out of plastic, fully posable, and I've got the Jesus Shaves coffee mug, and I've got all of these. I've got a hat that I brought back from Sydney, Australia. Just a random sort of a cacophony of just crap I've got all around my studio.
I can't function like that.
You can't. It's too much clutter.
It's got to be. Yeah, it's got to be clear for me. There's a couple of things I have. I have some sacred dirt that was packed that was supposed to be from a holy land in New Mexico that had something to do with Jesus. It's a little. You can buy them.
I'm sorry.
From New Mexico
dirt. Jesus visited New Mexico.
It's something about some dirt was transplanted to New Mexico from the Holy Land, and that's where they walk on Easter, and they drag this 7-foot cross. And there's
really,
it's this huge. There are people listening going, "You're not telling the story right." You're correct. I don't know.
Yeah,
but I have some of that holy special dirt, and then I've got someone made me because I used to say. if we couldn't figure out a problem, I would say just sprinkle some Jesus dust on it. And that was always my comment to everything. A fan met me one time and said, "I made you some Jesus dust," and it was this awesome.
Oh, I would keep that forever.
I kept those are the only two things I have in my studio.
I would
nothing
keep that
else.
forever.
Yeah,
There's a place I'd written about it in, I want to say it's New Mexico, where they have healing dirt or healing mud, and people will travel from all across.
That's it. I think that's it.
They travel from all over the world to go to this place, and they ship it to you if you ask them to. And then I don't know if I think you rub it on your skin, and desperate people. I think people desperate for hope are always going to lock into that kind of stuff. But,
let's before this part of the show ends, and again, I want everyone to join us at login.dogmadebate.com, and that's also where you can download the show after the fact with no commercials. But I want to close on this idea of not wanting to say no. And being so overwhelmed with stuff, like we were talking about the audiobook production, we were talking about show prep, show planning, all of this stuff that just buries us. It's so important to me to thank the people who help with this. And I don't know if you have people that work with you, contractors or volunteers or what, but I can tell you from my side of things, right now we have 48 people on staff with Secular Media Group in some form or fashion. Everywhere from producers to audiobook proofers who will listen to the editing. Like the editing is usually a paid thing. That's usually a contract basis, right? Because there's money involved with producing a book. But some people will just listen to the book and they feel like, hey, and Justin Krebs is one of those guys, he'll listen to these like, hey, I get to hear a Vic Stenger book before it comes out. This is awesome. And I go, just listen to it. And if I repeat myself or say anything wrong or whatever, read along with the book, tell me where there are mistakes. And inevitably, he always finds, you said this, the editor missed it, right? And so we get to go back and correct those. We have those folks. We have people that scan the emails ahead of time. We have PR. We have a PR director, Alicia Cook, who will scan through the emails and go, this guy really wants you to know his story. And if she forwards it to me, I know it's something super, super important. Some of the people that just go, Smalley, you were wrong about this one thing and you're an idiot, by the way. Sometimes I see those, sometimes I don't if she thinks it's important. But having staff, mostly volunteer, some paid but very, very small, having staff that's willing to help out with that kind of stuff is really helpful to be able to go, I'm going to read this manuscript. I'm going to respond to this individual's situation, or I'm going to help with this charity event or whatever. So if you don't have volunteers, I'm sure there are people out there listening that would love to help you with what you're doing to help lighten that load to some degree.
I have 2 Yorkies, and that's about what I got.
I can't believe that. I can't believe that.
No, I think people are very generous. I do get quite a bit of correspondence from people who say, is there a way I can help? And there's some of that probably is that I am some things are it's actually more work to subcontract out, because
sometimes if you do it once, if you get the right people and you train them, as long as they stick with you, it's helpful.
And a great example is, and you tell me where we're at on time, but like for a video production, I used to produce these pretty involved videos to the tune of 2 or 3 a month. Mm-hmm. I used to be a video producer who occasionally did radio shows and speeches. Well, now I'm a person I do radio shows and speeches, and then occasionally when I can produce videos. Okay. Videos, to a degree, have been kind of a casualty of the evolution of the Thinking Atheist site and shows. And I'm awesome with that. I'm cool with that, but I do miss it. And there will be people who will send me correspondence and say, I'm a graphic artist, or I'm a producer. I would like to help. Well, I mean, that's not a shallow pool to dig into, because then there's a certain flavor of the type of content that comes out. There's a certain style, and there are certain things I want it to be and say and do and feel like. And to manage it is almost more either that, or if they're not volunteers and they have really high quality work, but they charge you $100, $300 an hour to produce it, then it becomes financially not viable. And I'm going through that right now. I can write something together and storyboard it, but to put it in the hands of someone else, it's hard for me. Not because I'm just a control freak, but because I don't want to pay an obscene amount of money that I cannot afford. I'm a full-time activist. I ain't getting rich doing this. Right. And I want to make sure that it looks, feels, and is like the stuff that I do, Otherwise, it belongs probably on another channel. And that's I'm not really sure how to solve that problem. I'm not sure what the balance is there. I do think collaboration, delegation is obviously going to have to be the solution at some point. I think if the right people are there doing the right things at the right time, I think everybody wins. And I don't want to be so selfish with it that I limit what TTA can become because I just want to do it all myself. That's not it at all. So anyway, that's a challenge, and it's something I'm working through. So,
well, there's infrastructure in place. There's things, even if you want to consult on it, the two of us can talk about it.
I'll have my people call your people.
We'll have our people. I'll have my volunteers contact your volunteers.
My Yorkies will be waiting for your call.
No, I know there's so many people that would love to be involved with what you do. But and I know what you mean. Sometimes because we've done that, we've handed it off. We've done the volunteering. We've done the training, and we go, "This is it." And then the person goes, you know what? I'm moving to Canada. Goodbye. And you're like, "Oh, that was so much time spent on that person." So the crew we have now, the majority of people have been with us for 2 years or more.
Wow.
And it's really, really solid. It's really cool.
Whoever you are, you're awesome.
They're all awesome. They're all awesome. There's a huge list of people. I want to come back and do one more segment, I think, in this show, and then we'll take the rest of the conversation into the extended show. I can't go too long because we're on iHeartRadio, and they cap us at file size. I wish they would give me a length, because I think it's file size. Sometimes shows that are slightly shorter than 90 minutes still don't make it, and they pay all the bills. They are the reason we get to broadcast for up to 5 hours. If we
I
want
work
to.
for you, man. We'll just do what you need.
We'll do that. Coming up next, let's talk more about specifically activism and some of the feedback we get from listeners and putting together a show within a social movement and some of the things that get us into trouble.
Sounds good.
Is that cool? Awesome. All right, guys, more with Seth Andrews of the Thinking Atheist podcast right here on Dogma Debate. This final segment of Dogma Debate is brought to you by ValleyStormShelters.com. Like I've told you before, they by far have the safest storm shelters out there. Go to ValleyStormShelters.com, where you can actually watch them actively attempt to destroy their own shelters. Completely science-based, and they have a blast doing it. I mean, it's a lot of fun. They drive cars into them. They try to explode them. They shoot 2x4s into them. They do everything they can to make sure you're as safe as possible. We've worked with them after the recent tornado here on December 26th. I know it's a strange date for a tornado, but yes, it happened. We've worked with them to create a special fourth listener hotline and special discounts for Dogma Debate listeners. So give them a call at 800-210-7618. 800-210-7618, and you can check them out at ValleyStormShelters.com.
How do I get that gig? I've seen those. They shoot the 2x4s out of cannons and stuff right into the shelters to test them. That's just awesome.
Man, I don't know which gig you'd want. Would you? I would want to. I'll tell you what.
I would want to be in the shelter.
Okay, good. You can be in the shelter. I will drive the remote control car, and we'll broadcast the entire thing.
I don't want to be there when the vehicle hits it. But I've been through 2 twisters in my life, and I'll tell you, that'll flat wake you up in the morning.
You recently got a shelter too, didn't you?
I did, and
did you go above ground, underground?
It's one of those garage things. They came in and it looked like I was digging up Jimmy Hoffa out of my garage when they came in. They just dig out this sort of almost a tomb-like hole out of your garage. They cut right where you park your car, and then they bring in this hard steel or whatever it is shelter, and they drop it in, and then they just pour concrete around the sides, and you just park right over it. But it's long enough so you don't have to pull your car out
to get in.
We actually used it. The sirens were going off last spring, and we ended up in the shelter. There was a twister 10 miles away and headed our direction. But I was driving home actually from a speaking tour in Little Rock one night, about 3 years ago, and we had tornado activity, and Natalie was on the phone. She was calling me she was in the closet with Hannah, and we have no inner room the way our house is constructed, and I knew that there's no place for us to go, and I couldn't take it. So we finally decided, the peace of mind's worth it, and we did it. And I've become a huge fan. The peace of mind I've got, and I'm probably guaranteed nothing ever strikes. You put a shelter in, the tornadoes just go, oh, I'm just going to go next door. I've been through a couple, and now I've got this weird fascination with them. tornado documentaries.
Yeah.
I was younger.
I won't watch them now because it messes with me because that could be me. But once I have the shelter, and it's going to be here in like 2 weeks, I want to watch it all the time because you can't get me now. I'm not afraid of you anymore.
It'll flat wake you up in the morning, and those people who aren't from Oklahoma, it's interesting to watch them, Oklahoma or Texas or Kansas, Tornado Alley, to watch those people react during tornado season, right? Because we see flashing red on the radar, and the first thing we do, we're like, charge up the camcorder, Bill. Let's go get it, baby. And instead, I have family from up north. I have friends from California. Yeah. They're terrified,
Dave Fitzgerald. And David Fitzgerald was here. He had a speaking gig in Arlington. He was staying here, and we were also recording an audiobook for his then fiance, now wife, Dana Fredsty, who is the writer of the Ashley Parker zombie series. She did all of her audiobooks in the studio. So they were both here when a tornado came through, and they were like huddled in the bathroom going, you people deal with this every year? What's wrong with you?
The fact that it happened to Fitzgerald is what makes that story, by the way. You know what's funny is I am rereading. I am not making this up. I am rereading his book Nailed.
Yeah.
And
that's available on audio.
I tell you,
now through Pitchstone.
This is not a setup. Smalley did not ask me to do this. Neither did Fitz. But I'm telling you, although Carrier's on the historicity is a much, much, much more comprehensive book, and probably the one, if I had to pick one for the person who had all the time in the world, it'd be the one I'd say, well, here, go here. Whether you're a mythicist or not, and I don't know that I am or not, but these arguments that Fitzgerald has put together in Nailed are so compact and they're so easily digestible. At the same time, they are so well defended.
Right.
It's the one go-to book that I give to some people who are like, well, of course Jesus existed. And I just like, look, I know everybody gives you a book, but if you are genuinely interested, I have a book. I know I'll loan you mine. Mm-hmm. And go and digest this because he does such a good job of addressing the incongruity of Scripture, the Jesus mythology.
And he doesn't get insulted by you calling it a Mythicism 101. It's a step. It's the entryway. It's the gateway drug. It's the marijuana, if you will, of that field. And you're right. It's perfect for those people who say that's complete nonsense. This at least breaks that down and says. And I don't know where I stand on it either. I'm leaning more toward there's not enough evidence for me to believe that there was a historical Jesus.
Yeah.
But I say there obviously still could have been, but that's the direction I lean, and it's because of that book. And on that note, to get into what we were our segment for this evening, I catch hell for that.
Why? Because because you're not lampooning the mythicist? Or?
No. Because I mention that book so often to my pastor friends who are sitting across. I'll get emails every time I do it. I at least get 4 or 5 emails that go, there are other books besides Fitzgerald. I know. Robert Price is much more in depth of a scholar. David Fitzgerald is just a historian and a blogger. I'm like, he's never written a blog in his life. He's not a blogger.
Look, forget who he is and read the content of the book.
Exactly.
Which is about the actually pulled from the pages of Scripture, and he's contrasting the writings of quote-unquote contemporary historians.
And the Gospels. The way he tears apart the Gospels is so interesting.
He could be Mickey Mouse. It doesn't mean the arguments that are inside. I mean, if it's Mickey Mouse, you probably want to take another look at it. But going after the source is an easy way for them not to have to look at the Gospels side by side.
Good point. But even the atheist listeners, though, I catch hell from them for mentioning Fitzgerald so much. They're like, why are you sending everybody to Fitzgerald?
Oh, I didn't realize that. And I brought him up too, so now they're going to hate my guts.
Yeah, so that's good. Maybe, your email again?
I'm a deflection. Yeah.
Tell him your email
Send
address.
It to he really doesn't care at sethandrews.net.
What we tell everyone, I'm not afraid of your complaints. Just email me at brandy@dogmadebate.com. That's where everything goes. Everything. But for me, that's kind of the bridge here is, even when I feel like I'm doing something nice for someone, like, hey, I'm gonna extend this and say, look, you're a Christian. I'm not going to send you to Richard Carrier. I think that's too big of a jump right now for you to go.
Big meal to digest.
And some of Robert Price's stuff, I think, is on point because he directly, like we also produced his book, The Case Against the Case for Christ.
Yeah.
And that is something a Christian would wrap their head around. Richard Carrier's a little too deep. You at least have to be open to the fact that there may have not been a Jesus for you to even consider Richard Carrier. David Fitzgerald is that consideration, and that book nailed.
And you don't have to believe. You don't have to take a mythicist position for the argument that he's making.
Right.
You know, even if you think there was a charismatic guy, and that's very possible. I mean, I don't know that it's at this late stage in the game, it's not really, I don't know if it's even knowable. For me, is there evidence that the supernatural God Jesus existed? And of course, that's a definitive no. Of
course.
And I'm able to stop there and move on. I don't spend too much time. I mean, there's a debate coming up with Bart Ehrman and Robert Price.
Oh, is there?
There is. And it's put on by the Mythicist Milwaukee people. And honestly, I was kind of hoping that Ehrman and Carrier would get in a room together and have a debate, but I don't think that's ever going to happen. There's been a lot of water under that particular bridge. But, Ehrman and Price, I'm interested in the discussion, but I don't get hung up on it. Because for me, the larger question is there evidence of the supernatural Jesus? And if there's none, whether or not the Jesus myth was based on a charismatic guy, a prophet, an evangelist, some other dude, it's interesting, but I don't get, and maybe that's a problem. Maybe I should spend more time focusing on it, but I just don't. I stop with the God-man argument and move on.
When Dan Barker came to Dallas to do a debate on the mythicism argument, I had him on the show and I said, I didn't realize you were a mythicist. He said, well, I'm not necessarily. He said, my argument is where does the evidence stand? And I'm right there with him, but I had to challenge him for the sake of the show. And he started talking about all this missing evidence. And I said, well, the absence of evidence isn't evidence, Dan. He says, but it is evidence of absent evidence. And I went, well, what do you mean? He's like, well, there are very clear times where we should have seen something and we don't. And then we should have seen this, and we don't. So all of these things compiled makes you go, it probably didn't happen. It could have, so we're not going to say anything definitive, but it probably didn't. And then if you get into Vic Stinger's book, which I happen to have read now.
That cannot be an easy read, though. I mean,
it's not.
That's a thick little number, right?
It is, especially God the failed hypothesis dispels this common misconception, which I've said, maybe you've said it as well, that science doesn't deal with religion. Science doesn't deal with the supernatural.
Wait, Stinger said that?
Stinger said that it can.
Oh, okay, all right. I was about to come out of my chair.
No. He says he dispels that common myth to say we can test for God. Let's test scientifically for God. And he does a beautiful job of that in both books.
That was one of the challenges I'd had with the late Stephen Jay Gould, a scientist I hugely admire, who had dealt a lot with punctuated equilibrium and whatnot, and was a tremendous educator about evolution. But, Gould had this notion that science and religion are this non-overlapping magisteria. Like, you got this, but you got this, and they don't really cross paths. And I'm like, of course they cross paths.
Well, but the National Academy of Sciences takes that stand, that it's perfectly okay to have your belief, and religion and science don't mix. And Stinger blast them in his book. He's like, it absolutely does. You know why? Because people make extraordinary claims all the time that science goes, let's test that. Let's test if you can read minds. Let's test it. Let's test psychics.
Now, God
let's test chiropractic.
He doesn't live within your pithy scientific boundaries. He can bend the laws of space and time and do whatever he wants. In fact, the reason he's God is because he doesn't have to obey your natural rules, David Smalley. I mean, that's normally the kind of stuff that I hear.
Weird. People call you David Smalley.
Yeah, they do. They say it all the time. And I say, I'm sorry. I signed your name and autographs, but... Look, I'm doing a speech. I'm preparing a speech now that has a segment in it that deals with how. Have you noticed that many people, will tell you that they're really distrustful of science and scientists, especially secular scientists. God doesn't exist in your pithy scientific box. He is beyond. But the second they see some kind of science evidence that proves God, That's the first link they send to your email inbox. Look, science proves God. And it's this weird sort of oxymoron, because on one hand, they're saying science isn't a tool we can use to encapsulate or measure the Almighty. By the way, Stephen Meyer has written a book called Signature in the Cell that reveals God has written his handiwork in our very genetic code. Look, science has proven God. I mean, I got my own parents. Science, science is bunk, I think is what one of my parents had said. And almost in the same breath, they're telling me that science proves the Great Flood. Well, is science bunk, or did it just prove your point? Because it can't be both. And it's a frustrating, it's a frustrating angle. What is that? What is that meme that says arguing with the creationists is like playing chess with a pigeon?
Yeah.
I'm playing chess with the pigeon. And I get frustrated.
And for those who haven't seen it, the rest of that meme is that because regardless of how skilled you are, the pigeon is just going to knock over all the pieces, crap on the board, and strut around victorious. It's such a beautiful meme.
It's true. And, and I don't do a lot of debate. I know this show's called Dogma Debate. I'm sure you guys have a lot of great discussions. I'm better at conversation. I'm not good at debate.
Well, let me clarify that, because you know what? Stenger, when he was on my show, brought that up. He said you shouldn't call this show Dogma Debate. You should call it Dogma Discussions. And he told me that. And the reality is, when I do have a pastor in, I don't say, okay, you have 10 minutes, go.
Rebuttal, moderator.
No, we do this about religion from different perspectives. And that's ultimately what I encourage my listeners to do with their
I
family
think people
members.
get that, though. Yeah. I think people understand that we're talking about discourse. We're talking about the exchange of ideas.
Sure.
And we're talking about talking to people, not talking at people. But debate itself is a very specific skill that some people are good at and some are not. And it honestly, the challenge with debate, I think it was Jerry Coyne who had said this on the radio a while back, and I thought is that debate is quite often, unfortunately, so much a style over substance thing. Mm-hmm. He sounds so smooth. Yeah. And the content is over here on the back burner. And I think, is this, but I think debates do have their place. I love to watch Dillahunty, and there are a few others out there that do a fine job doing it. I'm much better, I think, in the vein that you are, where let's sit down over coffee and let's understand each other a little better in an hour than we did in the beginning.
And you know why I think shows like this are important? Because what people were doing for the most part is they were watching Hitchens, and they were watching Dillahunty, and they were watching, these very well-educated, brilliant philosophers go on a 20-minute opening and then a rebuttal and then a cross-exam, and they would go, wow, I have so much information now. I'm going to finally be able to explain this to my mom. And then they sit down with their mom, and they get 8 seconds into their explanation, and mom goes, but that's just your fancy science books.
Yeah.
And you go, but William Lane Craig never said that. Or that Muslim debater never said that to Lawrence Krauss. What do I say? So being able to broadcast those coffee type conversations, which is what I do here, I think is really helping family members go, I can take that information I'm learning from the debaters of the world and put it into a conversation piece.
Well, I think it's a different animal too. I mean, William Lane Craig is debating like an apologist debates, but he doesn't speak like the vast majority of cultural believers do, right? Because they've made a heart choice. They were likely raised in a faith. They have, I call it falling in love with an idea. And I did a speech on this called The Mother of Bad Ideas, where people fall in love with the idea of the Bible, of Christianity. They don't know anything about Jesus, right? Not really. They don't know a lot about what he did on earth. He was a good guy. He said love people. He multiplied loaves and fishes. He healed blind people. He raised the dead. And they killed him, and he rose again, and he was born in a manger. And I forgot the nativity, so I threw it there at the end. Sorry, I inverted it. But I mean, they just know these sort of basics, cliff notes. They have no idea about the historicity of Jesus, the Jesus story,
and don't forget the love your neighbor and turn the other cheek type stuff.
Yeah, not the Matthew. I've come to turn a father against his son.
Right?
Jesus,
no, and or the Luke, you have to hate your parents in order to follow me type thing. No, they don't know about any of that. And so I often tell believers, look. All the stuff you love about your religion, I love it too. All the love, warming, peaceful, helping the poor, I love that stuff. I don't want to take that away from you. And I think it's important for us as atheists to say that to believers because they think you're against loving your neighbor. Yeah. You're against turning the other cheek. And then I'll follow that with the things I hate about the Bible are the things you don't know are in it.
Do they respond to that?
Usually, yeah, with like what? And then we have conversations of their eyes getting wider and wider.
That's not in the Bible.
That's in there?
Yeah.
Really? Yeah, let's look it up.
People construct their own Jesus. I did a presentation called The Changing Face of Jesus, where we look at Jesus in different cultures and Jesus in different homes. And you find people who, they know Jesus is real. He lives in my heart. They know the first thing about the Bible. They don't own a Bible. They don't care. But they have constructed for themselves a Jesus icon that gives them comfort. It gives them a way to frame their own sort of moral, their own framework. They frame their framework. I guess that makes sense. Sure. It alleviates the fear of death. But it's obviously an individual Jesus that has characteristics that sort of reflect what they're about.
So I'm going to give a little spoiler.
Yeah.
The working title for my next book is You're an Atheist and I Can Prove It. And the whole concept is whatever version of God you say you believe in. Well, I believe in God the Father. I believe in God the Creator. I believe Jesus Christ died for my sins. I go line by line through these arguments, and I show in the book how, and I'm almost done with it, which is why I'm confident that I can throw that out there. I demonstrate how you have an idea of what that God is, but you've invented all the details about that deity. You've rejected the doctrinal version of that God just like I have. You don't follow that. You don't worship that. You've invented your God. You're an atheist just like me, but you've invented a God. You've made one up that seemingly fits in perfectly with your lifestyle so that you're forgiven. You are given this special pass, right? You have, due to your personal relationship that we all hear about, you get a pass. You've invented your God. You're an atheist just as much as I am. And that's the whole gist of the next book I'm working on, because so many people are like, I want to defend this God. This is why it's difficult for you to talk to me. This is why, because you want to defend the God you've created. But unfortunately, the other God has a book, and I can point to words that you disagree with just as much as I do, and you are forced to defend something you disagree with. You have to now come up with reasons for infanticide and innocent killing of innocent animals, and the deaths of over 2 million people in the Bible accredited to God, with only 10 accredited to Satan. You have to now come up with things that make you very uncomfortable. The stoning to death of gays. You have to now defend this, even though you're like, I'm totally against that. But that's your guy. That's the guy you worship. And not only do you worship him, you glorify him. You follow him. You bow to his feet and hope that someday when you die, you will worship him for eternity at his feet in heaven. You have to now make these. Now, if you could just defend the guy you made up, it wouldn't be so difficult. Yeah. But unfortunately, you can't, because you've made him up.
I was going through a particularly heated exchange with a religious family. This is a story I occasionally tell from time to time. I mean, the story that, coming from a fundamentalist family who believes in a literal hell, my father does especially, and being an atheist activist, I'm now the pet project, right? I mean, their energies, they have to fix me. I'm sort of a blight on the family tree. I'm the broken branch.
Think of the notch in that belt.
Oh,
Think of the notch in that belt. Yeah. If that guy gets to go to the rest of the family and say, my son was an atheist leader in the atheist community, millions of downloads to his podcast and videos, and now he is helping us spread the word of Christ.
I feel like I'm the castle and they're the approaching army, and they take a different angle every time I see them looking for a weakness. They try the cosmological, they try the moral argument, they try this, they try the personal experience, they try near death, they try all these. I mean, every time I see them, it's something else. They're just waiting for the one that might work.
You should totally do it one day and just go, oh my gosh.
Break into tears, Well, I was pretty upset. We were, I just felt like they'd crossed boundaries. And my own mother she's going to bat for Jesus. I just know Jesus. She's preaching Jesus. And I finally you realize that the deity that you are defending tells you in his own book, he tells you to shut up. You don't have the authority to talk to me about Jesus. Right? You're supposed to go home and tell your husband, and he comes and defends Jesus. You're not allowed to speak in the church. you're defending a book that has diminished your own worth. I have a higher opinion of you than the Jesus you're trying to ram down my throat. And I, of course, list the scripture references. Bam, 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 bam. And an hour later, it's, I know Jesus would never, he'd never mute my voice. And he had done that, she'd done that very same thing. She had constructed the Jesus that did celebrate women in all things. Husbands, love your wives is the verse that everybody always
I'm going to add that to my book. I'm going to add that to my book. That's one. A God that is equal of gender. I'll give you.
Do you need a narrator for that book? I'm just kidding.
You know how much I would love someone else to read that book?
Yeah, you can. Hey, you're good.
I guarantee you can pronounce all the words in my book.
But I thought it was interesting that she has constructed, and I think this is true with a great many people, they've constructed the deity that they don't have to apologize for, and they just slice out all the stuff. We saw an example of this with Pope Francis, who recently said something very nebulous about trying to expand the tent of the Catholic Church to be more accepting to those who are divorcees or who are not heterosexuals or whatnot. And, this is the church quite simply having to stretch and evolve away from the fundamentals of their own scriptures to remain relevant in the 21st century. Yeah. And it's something I think people and religions do. They must do in order to survive or at least explain what they're about. So
yeah. We lied. We said we were going to talk about struggles as an activist and how we get ourselves in trouble. And so now we're out of time. So we're going to continue the conversation in the extended portion of the show. Do you have some stories in mind that you're thinking, some emails you've got, some feedback you've got? Remember I mentioned the whole Fitzgerald thing. I tried to point us in that direction, but you're like herding cats here, Seth.
I know. I'm a high-maintenance guest. By the way, I've really enjoyed myself and look forward to the next however many minutes we do together. I'll bring some stories to the table. We'll see what happens, all right?
Cool, yeah, because I want to talk, because I remember the two of us talked one time on your show, and I think the way you worded it was something along the lines of anyone who thinks atheists are always rational people clearly haven't seen my inbox.
Indeed.
And I immediately thought of my inbox. And not only that, but my Facebook messages, the PR director's inbox, the website comments, the Spreaker comments, the iTunes ratings. And I'm looking at this going, wow, there's so much further we have to go based on that. So up next in the extended show at login.dogmadebate.com, Seth and I are going to be talking about some of the feedback we get from listeners and how we deal with that, because I think we deal with it very differently. I think we deal with it very differently, and I want to talk about those differences whenever we come back.
I'll be here.
Awesome. All right, the conversation continues at login.dogmadebate.com and facebook.com/dogmadebate. But and you can also see live streaming video now. All memberships see live streaming video. And I want to let you know to go check out our friends over at pitchstonepublishing.com, the brand new owners of Atheist Audiobooks. pitchstonepublishing.com, where both of those Vic Stenger books that I mentioned just went live as of a few days ago, and they're available on Audible. It's God the Failed Hypothesis and God and the Folly of Faith. More with Seth Andrews right after this debate. Seth, it's a pleasure having you in studio, man. We've done a few phone calls together, a few Skype conversations, but like you said, having that chemistry in person is there's nothing like it. There's nothing.
I've enjoyed it very much. I'm actually I could probably go all night. We could probably just sit here and just yammer on. I've got the opportunity to see a friend of mine who we went to high school together, been buddies for 30 years, and I only get to see him twice a year. So after we're done here, he's supposed to take me to some sushi place somewhere, and we're going to go.
Wait a minute. That's going to be, what, 8? Wait, you still got to break down all your video equipment?
It'll be a late night.
Be weary of any place that serves sushi after 10 p.m. Just, I don't know if he's taking you to a 7-Eleven or what, but just be careful.
I trust him. I think it'll be all right. So, but if it had not been for that, I'd be happy to hang around even more. But it's a real joy. It's a real honor to be able to do this. So thank you.
We've been known to go all night. We've the guys that were doing No Illusions from Scathing Atheist. Mm-hmm. He was doing a roast. And right at the top of his roast, he mentioned Dogma Debate and David Smalley. And then he said, he gave us credit and congratulations for the Foundation Beyond Belief thing. This was before we did the SSA thing. And then he said, and they're going to be, he goes, I couldn't imagine a 24-hour broadcast nonstop of Dogma Debate. It's like 24 hours. Think about 24 hours nonstop. He said, that's almost like doing 2 back-to-back episodes of Dogma Debate. Yeah. Because there was a time where we were doing, and then he says, I don't know if anyone's checked on Smalley lately, but if your podcast lasts longer than 4 hours, you're supposed to contact a physician immediately. And he was ripping me pretty good. I thought it was
That
funny.
would be a tough prep, I think. I mean, to prep a show that long.
We did it every week.
Anything for me over 90 minutes, and I feel like I've just run the Iron Man.
So you see this run sheet here.
Yeah.
We have that's what it was. It was 20-minute segments broken up. Sometimes I would do 14 to 15-minute segments.
Yeah.
And it would just be 4 hours.
Well, that's cool. I mean, I like your format too. I think if you were to dwell on one, like I do themed shows every week. I try to tackle something, and we'll do the random show. We'll do some off-topic stuff. I need from time to time to do something else. Mm-hmm. And
politics is my go-to, and I catch a lot of hell for that. People go, I didn't tune into Dogma Debate to hear you talk about Bernie and Hillary.
There'll be people who, if they go to the show, they expect to hear something and they won't get it. But I found that there were a lot of other. Well, here's a great example. I started the year with a show called My Date with Google, and it was just an off-topic thing, just all the crap that I just, I'd always wondered, but I never knew. We were at Christmas dinner, and
that's cool.
And Natalie was making deviled eggs, and I thought, why do they call these things deviled eggs? And I made a little note, and so over the course of months, I just made all these little notes, and so I went through and I visited various websites. I tried to make sure I did due diligence, got some of them wrong, and heard about it within 30 seconds. But we did a whole show on just, we're about learning stuff, right? I want to know more tomorrow than I knew today. Mm-hmm. And we did a whole show on it. There were a few people who bitched and moaned and carried on and complained and, I didn't turn into this. It's amazing the people who unsubscribe. They can't simply unsubscribe. They first must do a Shakespearean diatribe telling you why they unsubscribed. Then they hang around and watch the comments about why they unsubscribed, and then they comment on the comments about why they unsubscribed. And I'm like, I'll send you the Academy Award. Just get the hell out of here. Like, if it's not your speed, fine. I'm not insulted by that.
I would tell people back when the entire show, we had no membership at all, and the whole thing was just 5 hours of just free content. There was no membership at all.
Yeah.
I would just reply with, and you shall get a complete refund in the mail.
Yeah.
Right?
I'm sorry. I catch a little hell from time to time for like, I'm love the fact that from time to time I have sponsors on the radio. Someone's sponsoring an atheist freaking show. It's part of how I'm able to pay my mortgage. It's part of what funds my activism. It allows me to do what I do. And there'll be some people like, oh, God, I can't listen. I'm going to unsubscribe to the sponsor at the beginning. And they stomp off. And I think, I'm sorry, has my single sponsor model interrupted your 90 minutes of free content every single week? Because I'm heartbroken about it.
Right.
Yeah,
I mean, think I've got.
Look through the looking glass the other way and understand that there are a ton, and I'm sure you're the same way.
Sorry, it cracks me up because it's so much my real life.
There are people who come who want airtime, and we say, thank you, but no thank you, right? Mm-hmm. I can't, you're not a good fit for me. There have been many, I'm not a believer in what you're about. I don't like this. There have been
They're willing to pay us, and we still say no.
And even though we may need the money,
right.
This would sure make this month a lot easier. We think in the end game, is my credibility worth it? Do I want to do this to the show? Is it respectful to the listeners? And I say no. And I do my best to try to make sure if they get through the filter that they belong on the air. Now, that may come back to bite me. There may be something that comes up sometime that I didn't know about or I made a mistake. Fine. But I wish many people who complain would look through the looking glass the other way and say, hey, look, there is support coming in. Now, some of these people are like the people who support the indie band. They'll only support atheist activism as long as it's in their back pocket and nobody knows about it. And heaven forbid it be polished at all. Right. Now, it needs to suck. No one needs to be able to listen to it, and only I know about it. And then it's cool. But if it becomes too mainstream, you know what? Now I'm going to ridicule you and throw stones from the cheap seats. And I'm like, well, fine, you can throw stones. But the rest of us are moving on to the larger conversations out there. I want to hit as many people as possible.
So then that's the question, because I'm the same way. I want to hit as many people as possible. I would would join up with a larger organization in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
If I knew my audience would expand because I want my message out there.
Like if Sirius XM or whoever, I don't know, some major platform somewhere on FM, AM, satellite came to you, and you would do whatever you could within reason without selling out the format of your show.
Right. There would definitely be negotiation. I wouldn't just say absolutely whatever you want.
You don't get to tell me what to say and how to say it.
Right. Right. And there would be some talks. Look, I do this fourth listener membership thing. I want to keep that. I want to be able to provide, video for my members.
We're a family. We want to maintain
absolutely,
that. Yeah.
Absolutely. There would definitely be standards, but I would give more than I would demand. I mean, I would be like, yeah, let's do this, because I know my audience instantly goes from 20, 30, 40,000 per episode to, I don't want millions, potentially
just the
millions.
niche to be talking about this stuff. I want as many people as possible to be talking about this,
right?
Without selling ourselves out,
But once you do that, that's the key, and I think that's where we may be different, and I'm going to be a little envious of how you do it, because I haven't seen it.
Oh, here it comes.
I haven't seen it yet.
If you're going to backhanded slap me, let me turn just a little bit for you, so you have a good
Are
angle.
you turning the cheek for me? Are you turning the other cheek?
I receive your criticisms in Jesus' name, my brother. So go ahead.
When someone says something about me, like you said, there's at the top of the show, there's something about us that there is some ego that helps drives it, right? Did you hear that?
I thought I heard a little buzz, but it's...
Yep, that's what it was, and I had to twist it. Completely unprofessional. I had to shut down and fix it.
It's not, whatever. You're on man on the fly. You improvised.
So, what the hell was I talking about?
You were talking about...
Come on, Seth.
When
people talk crap, when they say the thing that they say.
Yeah.
And like you were mentioning, there is some ego involved. There is something about whenever you build this up, you want people to like it, right? This is what my entire week is driving toward. My whole week is driving toward putting this show together and doing a live broadcast for people. It's like Penn and Teller every 2 days in Vegas. They're on stage, they're performing, that's their livelihood, that's what they do. And so I do it. And then when I get feedback that's like, you're a hack, you suck, I'm just thinking, what does that do for you? And I think there are certain people, and I don't want to sound like I'm punching from the top down, and it kind of feels like that sometimes, but I feel like there are some people who don't either have the talent to do what we do, or have the drive or the ambition or the passion or whatever it takes to do it. And so there's a little bit of envy there. And so what they feel like their job is within our movement or within the audience, it's like the heckler. I'm not brave enough to be a stand-up comedian, so I'm going to stand back here in the dark and shout things at you to throw you off base because I'm jealous of your ability to hold this audience captive and to get 15, 20,000 downloads to your content. Do you feel like there are some people who deem themselves as the critics or the hecklers of either our listener base or our movement in general, and they feel like that's their contribution to just talk crap over social media?
Well, I think the reasons people throw stones like that are widely varied. I think it depends on the person, but there are some people. Still got that buzz?
Yeah, I'm just working on it.
Oh, all right.
It was your mic.
I've got. Here's a great example, like the Google show, My Date with Google. Someone will go in and say, actually, Seth is wrong about this. This point of fact is wrong. He got this wrong. That may even sting at first because you're like, crap. Yeah. But then, I need to know that. Like,
Absolutely.
if I'm going to be about the facts, I need to know that. There's a real difference from that. And Seth is the worst host in the history of internet radio. Oh, my God, he's terrible. And I think there are some people who they sort of live by the coda that I'm not doing it, but I can do it better. Right?
Yeah,
it's a contact sport for a lot of people. Right? It's like, if they're not really participating in the, let's face it, thousands of hours in the production room that people like us spend, audio and video, thousands of hours in the production room. And they go through and they listen to the first 3 minutes of something and it doesn't ring their bell. It'll ring your bell fine. But for them, I don't think they relate to the investment that goes into it. Now, if we're producing substandard product. We deserve to be called out for that. I mean, we've all gone to a film, or we've read a book, or we've seen a play, or we've participated. We've gone to a restaurant. Someone may have really invested themselves in the meal, and let's face it was not good. It was bad. It was spoiled. It tasted horrible. I mean, I think that's fair. It sucks, to hear it. But there's a difference between someone saying, you're factually wrong, or it wasn't my cup of tea, or you suck, you're the worst person ever, and they just find all of these horrible things to sort of tar and feather you with.
I was told the other day, you should be a grown-up professional like Seth Andrews. They actually said that to me.
What is that supposed to mean?
And then they said, you are a small man both physically and mentally. And I'm looking at this going, you realize you're calling me small as you're acting so immature.
Well, was it the cognitive dissonance guys I had on the radio, and they were talking about how that in the internet for many people becomes like, it's like if you're walking along and somebody walks in front of you and cuts you off, you will act a lot differently than you will if you're, I'm probably butchering their metaphor, but if you're in an SUV and someone cuts you off, then you're honking the horn and you're going up behind them, and you're swerving around. I mean, the internet for many people becomes a vehicle which makes them feel stronger. It allows them to say and do things that they wouldn't normally say and do if they were sitting eye to eye. I mean, they'll treat you differently. There was a guy, I remember we had a huge disagreement about something. I think he had called the radio show, or he had done something. This is back when I first started the show, and he did something I thought was just offensive. And I said so, and he wigged, and he did the most horrible stuff. And that went on for a while, and then he kind of faded out of the picture. And I ran into him at a convention right after the Reason rally. And we saw each other in person right there for the first time in an elevator as we were going to like something.
And you knew who he was?
I realized who he was when I looked down and saw his name badge.
Ah, okay.
And this guy who had hated my guts, and we'd had all of this negativity and whatnot, he looked at me and he smiled and he said, "You're not going to hit me, are you?" And I just busted out laughing. Of course I'm not going to hit you. And we shook hands, and from that day forward, we were friends. And it's because he saw me in 3 dimensions. There's, the internet's an amazing thing, and it provides opportunities for connection, communication, dialogue that we normally don't have in ways we can't enjoy otherwise. But if you don't see the nuance of the expression, the eye contact, the inflection of the voice, to be able to hear how someone is saying what they're saying. And if you're acting a little bit differently in the presence of someone, it just changes the game. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of these hipster types like to sit around and they just like to find something that's popular or something that's fun to criticize, and that's what they do. Was it the Joker who said, "I am an agent of chaos"? Well, they consider themselves cool. Hey, the Joker's cool. I'm going to be an agent of chaos. And the more problems they stir up, the more they're disrupting the momentum of the machine, the more they feel powerful. It's kind of a sad existence, I think. I wish people would spend a quarter of the time they spend tearing at other people in needless ways and find opportunities to connect and constructively criticize. No one likes to be criticized. From time to time, I'll go through the reviews on Sacred Cows, which is my latest book, right? Look, I know it ain't Hitchens. I know what it is. I know what it isn't, right? And people are welcome to not like it. Yeah. But I'll tell you, when someone goes and they say something really nasty about it, it stings. Yeah. It's like someone insulted one of your kids.
The first ever 1-star review, Baptized Atheist Guide on Amazon, I had to go read it.
Was it a religious person who did it?
Listen, that's what I was going to say. It was ripping me out. These guys, the writing style, blah, 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 was horrible. And I'm thinking, gosh, it's been overwhelmingly positive. This must be a unique perspective. It's a huge paragraph. And if you make it all the way down, you end up getting the line of, "This guy's just as bad as Dawkins, Hitchens," and I'm like, you should have started with that. That's a huge compliment to me. Are you crazy?
I saw one. It was like, Seth Andrews is very angry and he has been deeply hurt. And I thought, you realize you're talking about a book with a big cow on the front, on the cover, right? Well, what are you talking about?
Where's the anger?
They had made up their mind that people tell me all the time in the faith, I'm just my former radio employer, he thinks I'm just some angry guy. That's the only explanation for why someone could reject God. And I'm like, do you know me?
You need to be like, hey, I can send you a few podcasts. I can send you a few clips of some of the angry people in our movement. Seth Andrews is not one of them.
Well, you and I experienced something, and I think getting back to the point about the atheist who may not necessarily seek to be a constructive part of the community or conversation. I think the larger headline there is people are people.
Yeah.
You'll find ugly, horrible, despicable Christians, and you'll find beautiful, wonderful, charitable, loving Christians. It's true. They're everywhere. Yeah. It's not fashionable to say that to some people. They're like, all Christians hate, all Christians are bigots. I'm sorry, they're not. Many of these people they are part of a cultural faith. They are kind of Sunday believers. They don't hate gay people necessarily. You'll go look. Someone right now is already going to show me examples of someone who hates gay. I know they exist, but you can't blanket.
Nope, you said it on the radio. You can't believe it exists.
You cannot blanket blame all believers, because once you start getting, what's that saying? All generalities are false, right? You can't do it. It's too complex. It's too nuanced. And while you'll find the best and worst in the faith, you'll also find the best and worst in no faith, in non-belief. You find people who are atheist for really wonderful reasons. They came to it rationally. They worked it out. They decided, I'm an atheist. They said it out loud. There are other people who are atheists because they never thought about it to begin with, or they had irrational reasons for rejecting the ideas of God. The largest headline over this is we're all just human beings, and we have to keep each other in check. When I was still working a full-time job, I like this isn't three, but when I was working in corporate America, I'll put it that way, someone mentioned to me, I told them I was an atheist, and the person said, "Oh, Donna is an atheist too," and I went, "Oh, there's another one here." Wow!
Like, wow, really? And so I ran up to her desk. And she's sitting at her desk, and I'd never really gotten along with her.
Prepare the virgin sacrifice.
She was really socially awkward and I thought, this is going to be great.
Yeah.
And I this is the way I communicate. This is the way I did it. I was brand new to all this. I reach into my wallet and I pull out my American Atheist membership card, and I go, "Donna, look." And she turns around and looks at me. She sees the card and she goes, "I'm not an atheist. I am God." And I just slowly backed away from her cubicle, thinking I was severely misled.
Thanks for the rainbows and car keys. Was she serious, or was she just jacking with you?
No.
She did not think she was God.
There is some form of, I don't know if it's a Wiccan sect,
like we are all gods kind of thing.
Kind of a thing of not every human, but that she is in touch with something spiritual that gives her authority to be a god that I don't have access to, which is why she talked down to me. In other words, she was angry because I didn't believe in her. Type thing, like I am God, and it was such an awkward. I never talked to her again.
Wow,
I would love to now.
It looked great on a business card, right?
God
is God. Seth Andrews, God. Hey, it's great to meet you. Call me if you need sunshine on game day.
I got to tell you, that's what I think every time I see Morgan Freeman. I just think there's God.
He's always doing these specials and shows and commentaries on God. Does anybody know what his position is on the supernatural?
One day he was called a man of faith in a panel, sort of on stage live discussion, and he's sitting there very very matter of factly with his legs crossed, and someone said, "You're a man of faith, or a man of God, I think," and he turned to them, he said, "Why would you call me a man of God? I have never said I'm a man of God."
Really?
Yeah, and in his Morgan Freeman beautiful voice, he just kind of laid it out that's don't call me that.
I'd be interested to hear him talk at length about what he does and does not believe.
Well, this documentary he's doing now, the voiceovers he's doing now, is just called God, the story of God, and it's I've heard, I haven't seen it yet, but I've heard people say he's being very agnostic about it.
He's probably going to be kind of a magnanimous. He's not going to alienate, but he's probably planting some sort of a skepticism under subtext to what he's doing.
I don't know that he would ever come out and say, I'm an atheist,
Yeah.
which Neil deGrasse Tyson won't either, but it's one of these things of saying, well, what is God? Maybe God is all of us. Maybe God is everything.
Tyson gotten more bold, though? I feel like he's gotten more bold in the last 2 years.
He will attack it, but I haven't seen him use the A word.
I don't know if I have either. I had a chance to meet him at ApostaCon last year. And I'll tell you, there are a lot of people in the celebrity culture who you meet them and then you're sorry you met them because you think, the idea of them versus the reality of them, the idea was much better. Neil deGrasse Tyson came up and there was a line all the way around the room, snaking around the room, out the door, out the hall, past the elevators and whatnot. That guy had already given a long speech. He stood there and greeted with attention every person in that line like they were the only person in the universe. One of the most impressive guys. When I finally got through the line and had the chance to shake his hand, I was like, sir, I just want to thank you for being a storyteller of science. Thank you for bringing science to life for me and so many others. And I felt like I was the only guy in the room, and he made everybody feel that way, and I could not have been more impressed. If you ever get a chance to go see him speak and go and meet him, I think you'll find the same is true. He's a hugely impressive guy, hugely impressive. So anyway, a digression there on Tyson, but
No. I wanted to play something.
I see you're fishing for some gem hidden down in the vault.
I'm Neil deGrasse Tyson, not only listening to Dogma Debate, I'm a guest. And that must make me at least the fourth listener.
I just autograph something for me. Would you just here? I'll unbutton here. You sign here. Sign here, David Smalley. Oh, I will never wash this again.
He helped me in one phrase. In one brief conversation. He helped me change the structure and focus of my company. He said I made some offhanded joke about Congress. Yeah, Congress, those guys, those do-nothing guys. And he goes, he was on the show, and he goes, why would you blame Congress for that? We picked those guys. The problem isn't Congress. Don't act as if we stuck another president in the office. If we only had Obama, if we only had Bernie, all of our problems would go away. That's naive. It's the people that's the problem. We need to educate the populace, and the government, it'll take care of itself because that populace will become our government.
I wonder how he feels to be a science educator in a culture of ignorance. I mean, that's what he's talking about. Culture that knows more about the Kardashians than they know about. They can't even name our own vice president, but they know where Justin Bieber is, at any given moment, kind of thing.
And that's one of the things that that's how it shaped what I was doing. Is now our mission is to educate and entertain the public. It's to educate the public through entertainment and cultivating a secular society. It's not, we're going to go lobby Congress, and we're going to go get in the faces and we're going to protest, but our number one mission is to educate people. And another philosopher was on the show by the name of Penn Jillette. And when given an opportunity to tell me what he thought about me and my show, this is what he had to say.
David Smalley is a motherfucking bullshitting sack of shit.
Now, a little bit different.
Also would look good on a business card. I'm just saying.
Oh,
God, what a privilege. I had a chance to talk to Penn on the eve of the last ApostaCon.
Yeah.
Talk about a guy who's pulled out left and right. Everybody wants a piece. Everybody wants an interview and whatnot. And he was so gracious. We just hung out and chatted. We talked about magic and we talked about, all of these different things. And the guys, I appreciate the fact that he is. I saw Penn and Teller at the Rio back when I was still sort of emerging from the faith. They've been out there for, 15 years. And I remember he said he challenged God in one line directly. And I remember I was still sort of in that belief stage, dormant in the faith. And he said something from the stage that was directly atheistic. And I was like, oh, that poor man.
Oh, I was going to ask, did it make you not like him or look at him in a different way?
No, not at all. In fact, I loved the show, and I remained a huge fan. But I had this grief-stricken moment, that kind of religious pity party that people have. I bless your heart. If only you knew the love of Jesus, you would not feel this way. You just must be doing it wrong. And I don't know why I go into the Southern thing, but I always do. When I'm doing
it sounds like my family.
It's the only accent I know how to do, and so. What's weird is that our paths cross all this time later. And I actually told him, I said, I was in the audience like forever ago. And I remember being grief-stricken when you challenged the idea of God or gods. And I felt so sorry for you. And now I just want to tell you that I get it. You were
awesome.
Right. Yeah, I am so excited that you're challenging the way you challenge. And it was very cool.
How is it? How do you feel? And we're about to wrap up. I know I want to be respectful of your time, but how does it feel? Because I've had the honor of interviewing guys like that, and Les Stroud was on the show, Survivor Man.
Oh yeah,
Neil's been on twice. I call him my buddy Neil now.
Well, give him my number, would you?
He doesn't call me that. He doesn't call me that.
He doesn't return my calls. Damn it.
And then we had Penn Jillette, and I had Dan Dennett on, and it's. Interviewing someone that I've looked up to for so long is intimidating, but it's such an honor. I don't want to screw it up, and it's really the only time I have any nerves at all. I mean, getting on the air and telling my opinion is one thing, but interviewing someone, I don't want to make basic interviewer mistakes and all kinds of things come into my mind. How have you felt interviewing people that you've always looked up to, and who are some of those people?
Well, it's funny. It's like I flew to D.C. to interview Dawkins on the eve of the release of part 1 of his memoir. And so I literally just flew out there for the interview, brought a video kit, and we actually set up, and he walks in. It's like, it's Richard Dawkins.
That's him.
Kind of thing. And I'd only met him once before, and he, I was a little intimidated. Unlike like a Penn Jillette where you can, Dawkins for me was not the guy that you go have a beer with. Like, hey, what's going on, Richard? Good to see you. He's not that kind of cat. He's really kind of a reserved. In some ways, personally, he's almost a little shy, and he's always seems to be kind of in his own head. He's thinking about things, And so that whole day, I had to work a little bit. It was the only time I remember not feeling completely fluid with someone. Not necessarily during the interview, but it was just like, this guy's operating on another level here, and I want to make sure I'm not wasting his time, or I'm asking him something that he hates, or he's been asked a squillion. I want to make it interesting to make it interesting for an interviewee is hard when they're on the circuit all the time. They hear the same stuff. For me, the answer has been, if I'm comfortable in my own skin, and they know I'm not intimidated, and they know I'm having a good time, and they know I'm not afraid to maybe toss out a zinger and a harder question. Most of those people, it's almost always they respond positively, and they just roll, and they have a good time. And afterwards, they're like, "Hey, those were some great questions, man." Because instead of
do you prep for an interview like that? Do you prep for Dawkins?
Yeah, I prepped. I read his whole book.
Let me back that up. I know you prep. Do you script questions? Do you script?
For him, I actually had a series of questions, but I learned this and you probably know this as well when you're in radio. You plan a show, but be prepared to completely derail the train if something else starts to happen, right? And you have to be sensitive enough to, if you have a list, and this is a mistake many people make, they come in with a dozen questions. But all of a sudden, some interesting, fascinating topic comes up that's totally off your plan. They're so married to the plan that they lose this magical moment of opportunity. Yeah. And I've always thought, just go where it takes you. If they say something and you're like, what a great angle, mental note, and I will take that detour. And if that leads me elsewhere, we'll take that detour. And not everybody can pull that off. I've had some pretty good success with it. But I think if I'm comfortable enough in my own skin and they know I'm respectful of their time and I don't want to bore them to tears, quite frankly, I don't know that I've had any one interview that's just I walked away and thought, this was crap. The biggest challenge in interviews is when you have someone who's not necessarily a great communicator. Like if they're an author, doesn't mean they're a great speaker.
Right.
If they're a great scientist,
I found that. Yeah.
right? They may be a brilliant scientist, but to tell the story of the science they are doing in a compelling way for most casual radio listeners, that's not a guarantee.
No, and that's why people like Bill Nye and Neil deGrasse Tyson and Lawrence Krauss are so valuable to our movement and to this concept of spreading knowledge, is because they're so talented at communicating it and making it interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, I when I was about to have Neil on the show, that someone wrote a comment, I will definitely be listening. I could hear that man read the ingredients of a pickle jar, and I would love it. And so I told him that on the show, and he goes, okay, I'll do it. Pickles. It was so much fun, but it's, I don't know.
And you know what? That becomes it's totally different than, so tell me what scientist inspired you. You know, tell me about this. Tell me, when you go through this sort of cookie cutter list of standard interviewee questions, I think it bores them to, I mean, these people are, it's hard to do what they do, and it's hard to be as public as they are long term. I think we as interviewers have the opportunity to ignite a spark of something different and fun, and to create a chance where they get a chance to have fun instead of just doing a job. And those moments are part of that, I think. So.
That's always been my goal, is to have fun. And just about everyone who, I consider it a success when people leave here. Not that I'm pushing you to say this, but I've always had joy out of people going, you know, your show is just so damn fun. Like when I come in your studio, we have a blast, and it doesn't feel like work. The time flies, and it's so much fun. That's what I love getting that out of it. And I tend to get that from some I don't. I think we're both trying to get one guy. We've never been able to get him, and that's Sam Harris.
He's a tough one to pin down.
He's tough.
I can't get a return message from his website. But
okay, well then I'm winning, because I got a reply, but it was a denial.
Yeah.
But because I had Dan on, and Dan like blasted Sam over the free will thing. Yeah.
Look
and then
out.
so I emailed Sam, and Sam replied with something along the lines of, not now, my travel
He gets
schedule.
a ton of requests. I mean, he's not obligated, but one day I do hope to have Sam Harris
One
in
of us
the
will.
studio. No, this has been a tremendous amount of fun. I think what you're doing is important. I think how you're doing it
you
is
said
important.
it. Yay.
I think you're a storyteller for rationality. I think you relate to people. You care about people. And I'm honored to be a part of the show. Thanks for everybody allowing me to come in, sit in, be a part of the party tonight. It's been a lot of fun for me. So.
Well, I mean, I know people listening. A lot of our listeners are crossover. They have both of our podcasts on their list, and so it's really cool, I think, for them when the two of us get together and do something like this. Now, this is actually going to be on video for you, right?
I brought 3 cameras in. I'll go back and put together a video version of this and cut it a little bit creatively, and then I'll upload it, and it'll be on the Thinking Atheist YouTube channel sometime in the next several weeks, and hopefully everybody will get a new dimension to it. So
that's really cool.
I'm trying to think of a great soundbite to leave the show with, like, you know, when I walked in, I was a Christian, but now I'm an atheist, thanks to David Smalley.
Oh, damn it, there was music playing.
No, thanks again for tonight. It's been a joy, and I really had a great time. Thanks to everybody for listening as well.
Cool. Thanks so much, Seth. As always, the conversation continues at facebook.com/Dogma Debate. Next week, Jenica Crail will be here. You're talking to Jenica too.
I am on video. I'll have a video of her sometime in the month of May.
Yeah, so Jenica is our media relations director. She works full-time for secular media group, Dogma Debate. And she's going to be in studio Wednesday talking about coming out as an atheist. She's going to share a letter that she actually wrote to her family.
Wow.
It's going to be brilliant.
All right, I'll be here.
Thank you, Seth. We appreciate you being in studio.
Thank you.